The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Celestial Restaurant as Isabella wiped down tables and reset them for the evening service. Her black uniform was pressed and perfect, her dark hair pulled back in the elegant style required by management. To anyone watching, she looked like just another server preparing for another busy night in one of the city's most exclusive dining establishments. But inside her apron pocket, Isabella carried a different life entirely. Folded between her order, pad and pen were 3 business cards from venues where she had auditioned that week: a jazz club downtown, a wedding reception hall, and a small theater company looking for backup singers. None of them had called her back yet, but she kept the cards anyway, like tiny pieces of hope she could touch whenever the weight of serving tables became too much. Isabella had been working at Celestial for 2 years, ever since she moved to the city with dreams of becoming a professional singer. The restaurant was located in the heart of the entertainment district, surrounded by recording studios, talent agencies, and concert venues. She had chosen to work there specifically because she knew the customers would include people from the music industry, producers, agents, and executives who might someday give her the break she was desperately seeking. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days serving expensive meals to the very people who could change her life. While they looked right through her as if she were invisible, she had served Grammy winners, platinum-selling artists, and legendary producers, all while they discussed million-dollar record deals and never once wondered if their waitress might have talent of her own. Tonight promised to be particularly busy. The reservation book showed several high-profile tables, including a celebration dinner for Phoenix Records, one of the biggest labels in the industry. Isabella had looked up the guest list when she thought no one was looking. It included Victor Ashworth, the label's owner and CEO, along with several of his top executives and their newest signed artist. Isabella knew all about Victor Ashworth. Everyone in the music business did. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and had a reputation for discovering new talent, though the stories about how he treated people depended on who was telling them. His supporters called him a visionary who could spot a hit song from the first few notes. His critics said he was a ruthless businessman who crushed anyone who got in his way. As Isabella finished setting up her section, she could hear her manager briefing the staff about the evening's VIP guests. "The Phoenix Records table is our most important reservation tonight," he said, his voice tense with the pressure of pleasing such influential customers. "Whatever they want, however they want it, make it happen. These are the kind of people who can make or break our reputation with a single phone call." Isabella nodded along with the other servers, but part of her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the voice lesson she had squeezed in during her lunch break, practicing scales. In her car in the restaurant parking lot, her vocal coach had told her she was ready for bigger auditions, that her voice had the power and control to compete with professional singers. But getting those auditions required connections that Isabella simply didn't have. The evening rush began with the usual stream of well-dressed customers arriving in expensive cars and designer clothes. Isabella fell into the familiar rhythm of taking orders, serving food, and staying invisible, while the wealthy diners discussed their important business around tables that cost more per meal than she made in a week. The Phoenix Records party arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, making a grand entrance that turned heads throughout the restaurant. Victor Ashworth led the group, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to wonder if you can afford something. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Isabella's car and carried himself, like someone who expected the world to rearrange itself for his convenience. Isabella was assigned to serve their table, along with 2 other servers to help handle the large party. As she approached with menus and water glasses, she could hear Victor holding court, telling stories about famous singers he had worked with and deals he had made that changed the course of music history. The problem with most aspiring singers today, Victor was saying as Isabella set down his water glass, is that they think talent alone is enough. They don't understand that success in this business requires sophistication, connections, and the right kind of background. You can't just walk in off the street and expect to make it. Isabella kept her expression neutral as she distributed menus, but his words stung. She had been walking in off the street to auditions for 2 years now, facing exactly the kind of dismissal Victor was describing. She wondered what he would say if he knew his waitress had spent the morning auditioning for a backup singer position, or that she practiced vocal exercises every day before coming to work. As the evening progressed, Isabella noticed that Victor seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. He spoke loudly enough for nearby tables to hear his stories about working with famous artists, and he made a point of name-dropping celebrities and mentioning the expensive gifts he bought for his clients. Everything about his behavior suggested someone who needed constant validation of his importance and success. Isabella served their appetizers and first course efficiently, trying to stay professional despite Victor's increasingly loud commentary about the music industry. He was celebrating the signing of a new pop star to his label, a young woman named Melody who sat quietly at the table while Victor described how he had discovered her and planned to shape her career. "The key," Victor announced, gesturing with his wineglass, "is understanding what separates real stars from the thousands of wannabes who think they can sing. It's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about having the right look, the right background, the right connections. Most people simply don't have what it takes." Isabella refilled his wineglass and moved on to the next customer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Victor's words were directed at people like her, working-class dreamers who didn't have family money or industry connections to smooth their path. She thought about her own background, growing up in a small town where her biggest performance venue had been the local church, learning to sing from YouTube videos and saving every penny for voice lessons. As she worked, Isabella found herself studying the dynamics at Victor's table. The other executives listened to his stories with the kind of attention that suggested their jobs depended on keeping him happy. The newly signed artist, Melody, looked nervous and uncomfortable, as if she was still trying to figure out her place in this intimidating world of big money and bigger egos. Isabella had seen this pattern before in the restaurant. Powerful people, surrounding themselves with others who wouldn't challenge them, creating an echo chamber where their opinions were always validated. She wondered if anyone had ever told Victor that his attitude toward wannabe singers was cruel and dismissive, or if everyone around him was too afraid of losing his favor to speak up. The dinner service continued with Victor becoming louder and more opinionated with each glass of wine. Isabella could sense that the evening was building toward something, though she couldn't have imagined what form it would take. All she knew was that Victor Ashworth was the kind of man who enjoyed having power over others, and that combination of alcohol and arrogance rarely ended well for the people unlucky enough to be in his path. By 9 o'clock, Victor had consumed most of a bottle of expensive wine and his voice had grown louder with each passing course. Isabella noticed other diners glancing over at his table with annoyed expressions, but no one dared to complain about someone so wealthy and powerful. The restaurant manager hovered nervously nearby, clearly torn between wanting to quiet Victor down and being too afraid to offend such an important customer. Isabella was clearing the main course plates when disaster struck. As she reached across the table to collect Victor's plate, her sleeve brushed against his wine glass. The glass tipped over, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth and splashing drops onto Victor's expensive suit jacket. The accident happened, in slow motion. Isabella watched in horror as the dark red liquid spread across the pristine white fabric and saw several drops land on Victor's silver jacket. Her heart sank as she realized what she had done, knowing that customers like Victor could destroy her job with a single complaint. "You clumsy idiot!" Victor's voice exploded across the restaurant loud enough to stop conversations at tables throughout the dining room. "Look what you've done! This jacket cost more than you make in 6 months." Isabella immediately began apologizing, grabbing napkins to try to clean up the spill. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ashworth. I'll get the manager right away and we'll take care of the cleaning bill for your jacket. I'm really, truly sorry." But Victor was just getting started. He stood up from his chair, brushing at the wine spots on his jacket with exaggerated drama. "Sorry? Sorry doesn't fix a $2,000 jacket, does it? Do you have any idea how hard it is to get wine stains out of silk?" The restaurant manager appeared within seconds, practically running across the dining room with a look of panic on his face. "Mr. Ashworth, I am so incredibly sorry about this. We'll take full responsibility for the cleaning costs, of course. Please accept our deepest apologies." Victor waved his hand dismissively at the manager, his attention focused entirely on Isabella. The cleaning costs are the least of my concerns. What I want to know is how this restaurant justifies hiring staff who are so careless and unprofessional. Isabella felt her face burning with shame as every eye in the restaurant turned toward their table. She could see other servers watching with sympathy and fear, knowing that any one of them could be in her position. The wealthy diners at nearby tables looked on with the kind of uncomfortable fascination people have when witnessing someone else's humiliation. "I understand you're upset," Isabella said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "It was completely my fault and I take full responsibility. Please let us make this right." Victor's laugh was cold and cutting. "Make it right? How exactly do you propose to do that? Can you afford to replace a custom-tailored jacket from Milan? Can you compensate me for the embarrassment of being covered in wine at a business dinner?" His business associates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly embarrassed by his behavior but unwilling to speak up against their powerful colleague. The newly signed artist, Melody, looked particularly distressed, as if she was seeing a side of Victor that she hadn't expected. "What we have here," Victor continued, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent restaurant, "is a perfect example of why certain people should stick to jobs they're actually qualified for. This young woman obviously doesn't have the grace or competence required for fine dining service." Isabella clenched her hands to stop them from shaking. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but Victor's attack felt personal in a way that went beyond the spilled wine. He seemed to be enjoying her humiliation, using it as an opportunity to demonstrate his power and superiority. "I've been working in restaurants for years," Isabella said, finding a bit of strength in her voice. "This was an accident. I'm a good employee and I work hard to—" "Work hard?" Victor interrupted with another harsh laugh. "My dear girl, working hard isn't the same as being qualified. Some people are simply born for service positions, while others are destined for greatness. It's important to understand which category you fall into." The cruel words hung in the air like poison. Isabella could feel tears starting to sting her eyes, but she refused to give Victor the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She thought about her voice lessons, her auditions, all the dreams she carried that Victor would dismiss as the foolish fantasies of someone who didn't know her place. Victor's attention was caught by something across the restaurant, and his expression shifted to one of calculated cruelty. "You know what, I just noticed something interesting." He pointed toward the small stage area in the restaurant's lounge section, where a karaoke setup sat unused. "This establishment has entertainment facilities. Perhaps our clumsy server would like to provide some entertainment to make up for." "Ruining my evening?" The suggestion sent a chill through Isabella's entire body. She could see exactly what Victor was planning. He wanted to humiliate her further by forcing her to attempt some amateur performance in front of the entire restaurant. It was the kind of sadistic entertainment that wealthy bullies like Victor seemed to enjoy. "Oh, that's not necessary," the restaurant manager said quickly, sensing the dangerous territory they were entering. "We're perfectly happy to comp your entire meal and take care of any cleaning costs." "Nonsense," Victor said, waving away the manager's protests. "I think it would be educational for everyone here to see what happens when people try to perform above their station. After all, this is the entertainment district. Surely our server has some hidden talents she'd like to share." Isabella felt trapped, like a mouse being played with by a cat. If she refused, Victor would see it as proof that she knew her place and wasn't worthy of anything beyond serving tables. If she agreed, he expected her to embarrass herself and provide him with cruel entertainment at her expense. "I think you should leave her alone," said a quiet voice from Victor's table. Everyone turned to look at Melody, the young singer he had just signed. She made an honest mistake. There's no reason to humiliate her. Victor's eyes flashed with anger at being contradicted. "Melody, darling, you're new to this business, so let me explain something to you. Success requires understanding the difference between those who perform and those who serve. It's a lesson everyone in this industry needs to learn." He turned back to Isabella with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So what do you say? Are you brave enough to show us what you can do? Or would you prefer to admit that some people are meant to stay in the kitchen where they belong?" The challenge was delivered. With the confidence of someone who believed he had already won, Victor expected Isabella to either refuse and prove his point about knowing her place, or to attempt some embarrassing amateur performance that would validate his beliefs about class and talent. Isabella looked around the restaurant at the faces, watching her, some sympathetic, others curious, many simply uncomfortable with the cruelty they were witnessing. She thought about all the auditions she had failed, all the times she had been dismissed without being given a real chance to show what she could do. For the first time in years, Isabella found herself in front of an audience that included real music industry professionals. It wasn't the way she had dreamed it would happen, but it might be the only opportunity she would ever get. "All right," Isabella said quietly, her voice barely audible above the silence. "I'll do it." Victor's smile widened with anticipation, completely unaware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The word "all right" seemed to echo through the restaurant like a bell. Isabella could feel every conversation stop, every fork pause halfway to someone's mouth, every head turn in her direction. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation and discomfort, as diners realized they were about to witness something unprecedented. Victor's smile grew wider, but there was something predatory about it. He had gotten exactly what he wanted, the opportunity to publicly demonstrate the difference between people like him and people like Isabella. He leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who had just set a trap and watched his victim walk straight into it. "Wonderful," Victor announced loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we're about to be entertained by our talented waitress. I'm sure this will be quite educational for everyone involved." Isabella felt her legs trembling as she looked toward the small stage area. The karaoke setup sat there like a challenge, the microphone reflecting the restaurant's elegant lighting. She had performed on stages before, but never like this. Never as the target of someone's cruelty, never with the expectation that she would fail spectacularly. The restaurant manager looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Other servers watched with a mixture of sympathy and terror, knowing that Isabella's humiliation could just as easily be their own. Some of the wealthy diners appeared uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, but none of them spoke up to stop what was happening. "This is wrong," Melody said quietly from Victor's table, but her voice was lost in the murmur of conversations as people began to realize what was happening. Word was spreading from table to table that the waitress was about to perform, turning Isabella's moment of crisis into dinner theater. Isabella walked slowly toward the stage, her mind racing with doubts and fears. What if her voice cracked from nerves? What if she forgot the words to whatever song she chose? What if she proved Victor right and embarrassed herself so badly that she could never show her face in the entertainment district again? But as she walked, something else began to surface underneath the fear. Isabella thought about all the times she had been dismissed without being given a chance, all the auditions where she was judged before she even opened her mouth, all the dreams she had been told to abandon because people like her didn't make it in the music business. She thought about Victor's cruel words about people knowing their place, about his assumption that she was nothing more than a clumsy servant, who should be grateful for whatever job she could get. She thought about the way he had used her accident as an excuse to demonstrate his power over someone he saw as beneath him. As Isabella reached the stage, she turned back to look at the restaurant full of watching faces. Victor sat prominently, in the center, clearly expecting to enjoy the show. His business associates looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Other diners watched with curiosity, some with sympathy, others with the kind of morbid fascination people have for watching someone else's downfall. "Well?" Victor called out impatiently. "We're waiting for this great performance you promised us." Isabella stepped onto the small stage and approached the microphone. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the mic stand to steady herself. The karaoke machine offered a selection of popular songs, but Isabella found herself looking past it. She had spent years training her voice, learning to perform without backing tracks, developing the kind of technical skill that came from serious study. "I don't need the machine," Isabella said quietly into the microphone. Her voice carried clearly through the restaurant's sound system, and the simple statement caused another ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Victor's eyebrows rose in amusement. Oh, how impressive. A cappella performance from our multi-talented server. This should be quite something. Isabella closed her eyes and tried to block out everything around her. The watching faces, Victor's mocking voice, the weight of expectation and judgment pressing down on her from all sides. She thought about her voice teacher's words from that afternoon. Your voice has power, Isabella. Trust it. Trust yourself. She thought about her childhood, singing in the church choir in her small hometown, the way music had always been the one thing that made her feel truly alive. She thought about the countless hours she had spent practicing, the sacrifices she had made to pursue her dreams, the belief that someday her talent would be recognized. Isabella opened her eyes and looked directly at Victor. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to sing some safe, simple song that might minimize her embarrassment. She was going to show everyone in that restaurant exactly who she really was. I'm going to sing Summertime by George Gershwin, Isabella announced, her voice growing stronger. It's a song that requires real technical skill and emotional depth. I hope that's challenging enough for everyone here. The choice sent another wave of surprised murmurs through the restaurant. Summertime was a jazz standard known for its difficulty, the kind of song that separated amateur singers from professionals. It required incredible vocal control, perfect pitch, and the ability to convey deep emotion through music. Victor's confident expression faltered slightly. He had expected Isabella to choose something simple and contemporary, something that would make her amateur status obvious to everyone listening. The choice of such a demanding classical piece suggested either foolish overconfidence or genuine ability. Interesting choice, Victor said, though his voice had lost some of its mocking tone. I do hope you're prepared for such a challenging piece. It would be quite embarrassing to attempt something so far above your abilities. Isabella adjusted the microphone to the right height and took a deep breath. She could feel her heart pounding, but underneath the nervousness was something else. A fierce determination to prove that talent had nothing to do with social class or family connections. She thought about every audition she had failed, every time she had been told she wasn't quite right for a part, every moment when she had wondered if Victor was right about people like her knowing their place. All of that doubt and frustration began to transform into something powerful. Before I begin, Isabella said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the silent restaurant, I want to say something to Mr. Ashworth and everyone else who thinks they know what I'm capable of based on where I work or where I come from. Victor's face darkened at being addressed directly, but he remained silent, perhaps sensing that stopping her now would make him look weak in front of his business associates. Isabella looked out at the sea of faces watching her, some curious, others skeptical, a few actually supportive. Real talent doesn't care about your bank account or your family name. It doesn't matter if you learn to sing in a mansion or in a church choir. Music is about heart, about truth, about having something to say and the courage to say it. She paused and looked directly at Victor again. And sometimes the people you dismiss without a second thought are the ones with the most to offer. Victor opened his mouth to respond, but Isabella had already turned back to the microphone. The restaurant fell completely silent as she prepared to either vindicate her bold words or prove his point in the most public way possible. Isabella closed her eyes, took one final deep breath, and began to sing. The first note that emerged from Isabella's throat was like nothing anyone in the restaurant had expected. It was rich, warm, and perfectly controlled, with the kind of professional quality that immediately commanded attention. The opening line of Summertime floated through the air with such purity and power that several people actually gasped in surprise. Victor's smug expression froze on his face. This wasn't the amateur embarrassment he had anticipated. The voice, filling his expensive restaurant, was unmistakably that of a trained professional, someone with years of serious vocal study and natural talent that couldn't be faked. As Isabella continued singing, her voice grew stronger and more confident with each phrase. The famous Gershwin melody seemed to flow effortlessly from her, but she wasn't just hitting the notes correctly. She was interpreting them with the kind of emotional depth that turned a simple song into a storytelling experience. The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Conversations that had resumed in whispers died away entirely. Servers stopped moving between tables and stood transfixed. Even the kitchen staff had emerged from the back to listen, drawn by the extraordinary sound coming from their dining room. Isabella's rendition of Summertime was hauntingly beautiful, but there was something more powerful underneath the technical perfection. Her voice carried the weight of every struggle she had faced, every dream she had been told to abandon, every time someone had looked at her uniform and assumed they knew her worth. The pain and hope in her voice transformed Gershwin's lullaby into something deeply personal and universal at the same time. Victor found himself leaning forward in his chair despite his intention to remain dismissive. His trained ear, developed over decades in the music industry, couldn't deny what he was hearing. This wasn't just good singing. This was exceptional talent, the kind that record executives spent fortunes trying to find and develop. At nearby tables, other music industry professionals were having similar realizations. A talent scout from Atlantic Records put down her wine glass and pulled out her phone to record. A Broadway producer who had been quietly enjoying dinner found himself calculating whether Isabella's voice would work for the musical he was casting. A music journalist began taking notes, sensing that he might be witnessing the beginning of something significant. As the song built toward its emotional climax, Isabella's voice soared into the higher registers with breathtaking ease. The difficult passages that challenged even professional singers seemed effortless under her control. She demonstrated perfect pitch, flawless breath support, and the kind of vocal agility that came from years of disciplined training. But more than the technical skill, it was the emotion in Isabella's performance that captivated everyone listening. She sang as if her life depended on it, pouring every ounce of passion and determination into each note. The lyrics about dreaming and hoping took on new meaning when delivered by someone who had fought for every opportunity to share her gift. Victor's business associates were staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to embarrassment. They had expected to share in his cruel entertainment, to laugh along as he humiliated a working-class waitress who didn't know her place. Instead, they were witnessing their powerful colleague being proved spectacularly wrong about someone's abilities. Melody, the young singer Victor had just signed to his label, was watching Isabella with undisguised admiration. As someone who had recently gone through the audition process herself, she recognized the level of skill being displayed on the small restaurant stage. She also understood the courage it took to perform under such hostile circumstances. As Isabella moved into the final verse of the song, something magical happened in the restaurant. The hostile energy that Victor had created with his cruelty began to transform into something else entirely. People weren't watching a humiliation anymore. They were witnessing the emergence of a genuine artist who had been hiding in plain sight. Isabella's voice dropped to a whisper for the final lines, demonstrating the kind of dynamic control that separated professionals from amateurs. The soft, tender conclusion of Summertime hung in the air like a prayer, beautiful and vulnerable, and absolutely perfect. When the last note faded into silence, the restaurant remained completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. The moment stretched out like a held breath, as if everyone was afraid that speaking would break the spell that Isabella had woven around them. Victor sat frozen in his chair, his face pale with shock, and something that might have been shame. The cruel words he had spoken earlier now seemed to echo mockingly in his own ears. He had set out to prove that people should know their place, and instead had given a platform to someone whose talent far exceeded many of the artists on his own record label. Finally, from somewhere in the back of the restaurant, a single person began to clap. Others quickly joined in, and within seconds the entire dining room erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, giving Isabella a standing ovation that went on, growing louder rather than fading. Isabella stood on the small stage, tears streaming down her face as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. For years she had dreamed of a moment like this, A chance to show what she could really do in front of people who mattered in the music industry. It hadn't come the way she had imagined, but the result was more powerful than any audition she had ever attended. The applause continued as several people began making their way toward the stage. The talent scout from Atlantic Records was the first to reach her, followed closely by the Broadway producer and the music journalist. Each of them wanted to talk to Isabella, to learn more about her background and training, to discuss opportunities that might be available for someone with her obvious abilities. Victor remained seated at his table, watching his carefully constructed narrative fall apart around him. His business associates were no longer looking at him with respect and admiration. Some appeared embarrassed to be associated with his behavior. Others seemed angry at having been made complicit in his attempt to humiliate someone whose talent they now recognized. Melody had tears in her eyes as she stood and began walking toward the stage, wanting to congratulate Isabella and perhaps apologize for Victor's behavior. Other customers throughout the restaurant were approaching as well, drawn by the same impulse to acknowledge what they had witnessed. But the most significant moment came when Isabella finally looked down at Victor's table. Their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, and in that look was everything that had changed in the space of a single song. Victor's assumption about her worth, his cruel confidence in his own superiority, his belief that talent was determined by social class, all of it had been shattered by the undeniable power of Isabella's voice. Isabella wiped the tears from her eyes and stepped down from the stage, surrounded by people eager to talk with her about her future. As she moved through the crowd of admirers and industry professionals, she passed Victor's table one more time. This time, it was Victor who looked away first. The crowd around Isabella grew larger as more people approached the stage area. Business cards appeared from everywhere. Talent agents, music producers, venue owners, and recording executives all wanting to connect with the woman who had just delivered one of the most powerful performances they had ever witnessed in such an intimate setting. "That was absolutely incredible," said Patricia Williams, the talent scout from Atlantic Records, pressing her card into Isabella's hand. "I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've rarely heard raw talent like that. We need to talk about your future." A Broadway producer named James Chen was equally enthusiastic. "I'm casting for a new musical that opens next spring. Your voice would be perfect for the lead role. The way you interpreted Summertime showed exactly the kind of emotional range we're looking for." Isabella felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention, but also vindicated in a way she had never experienced before. These weren't polite compliments from friends trying to encourage her dreams. These were industry professionals offering real opportunities, based on what they had just heard. Meanwhile, Victor sat alone at his table, his business associates having moved away to distance themselves from the embarrassing situation he had created. His expensive suit and confident demeanor couldn't hide the fact that he had just been humiliated by someone he had tried to crush. Melody approached Isabella with genuine admiration in her eyes. "I wanted to apologize for what Victor did to you tonight," she said quietly. "What you just did was amazing, and the way he treated you was completely wrong." Isabella smiled at the young singer. "Thank you for standing up for me earlier. That took courage." "Not as much courage as what you just did," Melody replied. "I don't think I could have performed like that under those circumstances." As the crowd around Isabella continued to grow, something interesting began happening at Victor's table. His remaining business associates were having quiet but intense conversations, occasionally glancing in his direction with expressions that suggested his behavior had cost him more than just his pride. One of his executives, a woman named Rachel, finally approached him directly. "Victor, we need to talk about what just happened here tonight," she said in a voice that was professionally calm but clearly angry. "It was an unfortunate situation," Victor said, trying to maintain his authority. "But let's not lose perspective over one decent amateur performance." Rachel's expression hardened. "Amateur? Victor, that woman just delivered a performance that would be impressive on any professional stage. And the way you treated her..." She shook her head. "This is going to be a public relations nightmare for the label." Victor looked around and realized that several people in the restaurant were recording with their phones, capturing not just Isabella's performance, but also his reaction to it. In the age of social media, his cruel behavior would be shared thousands of times before the night was over. Back near the stage, Isabella was being introduced to more industry professionals who had been dining quietly in the restaurant. A music journalist was asking about her background and training, clearly already working on a story about the discovery of a hidden talent in an upscale restaurant. "How long have you been studying voice?" asked Dr. Martinez, a professor from the local conservatory who had been having dinner with his wife. "About 8 years seriously," Isabella replied. "I've been taking lessons whenever I could afford them, practicing every day, doing whatever it took to improve my technique." Dr. Martinez nodded with approval. "It shows. Your breath control and vocal placement are excellent. Have you ever considered formal conservatory training?" Isabella laughed, but there was no bitterness in it anymore. "I've dreamed about it, but I could never afford that kind of education. I've been working to support myself while trying to build a singing career on the side." "Well," Dr. Martinez said with a smile, "I think after tonight you might find that doors start opening for you that were closed before." The restaurant manager appeared at Isabella's side, looking nervous, but also amazed by what had transpired. "Isabella, I just wanted to say that was absolutely incredible. I had no idea about your talent." "Thank you," Isabella said. "And don't worry about the job. I understand if this whole situation has put you in an awkward position." The manager shook his head. "Are you kidding? Do you have any idea how many people are going to want to come to the restaurant where this happened? We'd be honored if you'd consider doing regular performances here." As the evening continued, Victor found himself increasingly isolated. His remaining business associates were clearly uncomfortable with being associated with his behavior, and several other restaurant patrons made sure to express their disapproval as they left. The final blow came when his newest signed artist, Melody, approached his table one last time. "Victor, I've been thinking about our contract," she said quietly. "After seeing how you treated Isabella tonight, I'm not sure Phoenix Records is the right label for me." Victor's face went pale. "Melody, you're overreacting. This was just an unfortunate misunderstanding." "No," Melody said firmly. "This was you showing your true character. I want to work with people who respect talent regardless of where it comes from. I'll be having my lawyer review our contract tomorrow." As Melody walked away, Victor realized the full cost of his evening's entertainment. He had lost the respect of his colleagues, damaged his label's reputation, and potentially lost a valuable new artist, all because he couldn't resist the urge to humiliate someone he saw as beneath him. Meanwhile, Isabella was exchanging contact information with what seemed like half the music industry. The talent scout from Atlantic Records was discussing recording opportunities. The Broadway producer was talking about audition schedules, and several venue owners were offering performance bookings. "I have one more thing to give you," said Patricia Williams, pulling out a second business card. "This is for our artist development program. We work with singers who have exceptional raw talent but need support building their careers. Based on what I heard tonight, I think you'd be perfect for it." Isabella took the card with shaking hands. Artist development programs were exactly the kind of opportunity she had been dreaming about: professional support, industry connections, and the resources to build a sustainable music career. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Isabella found herself standing alone for the first time since her performance. She looked around the restaurant where she had worked for 2 years, serving tables and dreaming of something more. Her phone buzzed with a text from her voice teacher. "Saw the video online already. I'm so proud of you. This is just the beginning." Isabella smiled as she realized that her performance had already been shared on social media, spreading her talent far beyond the walls of the restaurant. The cruel challenge that Victor had intended as her humiliation had become the launching pad for her career. She picked up her server's apron from where she had left it by the stage and folded it carefully. Tomorrow she would start making calls to the industry professionals who had given her their cards tonight. She would begin the process of transforming from a waitress with dreams into a professional singer with opportunities. As she prepared to leave, Isabella took one last look at Victor's table. He sat alone now, staring at his phone, probably reading the social media posts about the evening's events. Their eyes met briefly across the restaurant, and Isabella felt no anger or triumph, only pity for a man who had let his prejudices blind him to the beauty that existed all around him. Isabella walked out of Celestial Restaurant for the last time as a waitress, carrying with her the business cards that would change her life, and the knowledge that sometimes our worst moments can become the doorways to our greatest triumphs.